And welcome back. I'm Bill English, the founder of Bible and Business, and I want to welcome you to another episode of my continuing studies on the leadership lessons that we can learn from the life of Moses in the book of Exodus. Today we're going to be in Exodus chapter 2, verses 11 through 15. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to click over here and let's go ahead and read the scriptures together. One day after Moses had grown up, this is verses 11 through 15 now, he went out to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. Looking this way and that, and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. The next day he went out and saw two Hebrews fighting. He asked the one in the wrong, "Why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew?" And the man said, "Well, who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian?" Then Moses was afraid and thought, "What I did must have become known." When Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in Midean, where he sat down by a well. Well, let's see what we can learn first about leadership, and we're going to learn some things about Moses as well. First of all, in verse 11, after he had grown up, the Hebrew word there means literally to grow up or to become great, to become wealthy, to become important. And one of the cognate words of this word is the word that we use. It's migdal. It's the word that we use for tower or watchtower in the Old Testament. And so the sense is becoming much more than what you were yesterday. There's this sense that you were in one state yesterday, and today you're becoming or you're growing into a different state. Okay? Now, his own people is repeated twice here. Look at this. One day after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were, and he watched them, his own people, at their labor. His own people is repeated twice here. And the word there is the common word for brother or companion. And it's a word that denotes a close bond between two people. So Moses is, even at age 40 now, because this is roughly the age that we think he's at here at this point, he identifies with his ethnicity. And I kind of got to think that he wonders, why me? Why me? I'm Hebrew, just like they are, and I'm living in the lap of luxury, and they're not. And it's only because my stepmom, my princess mother, my Egyptian mother plucked me out of the water. Otherwise, I would be down there with all these other guys toiling under hard labor. And you kind of wonder, this is speculation on my part, of course, because the text just doesn't tell us. The text is silent. And whenever we get outside the text, we are speculating. We are not exegeting anymore. We're not deriving from the scriptures. We're simply speculating. But I'm speculating. I just wonder if he didn't feel guilty. I just wonder when he would go out and watch his fellow brethren labor hard. I just wonder if he didn't feel guilty about that. And the word watch there means to perceive, to understand, to examine. And the word hard labor there is the same word that's used in Hebrew 1 or Exodus 1:11, where the Hebrews were put under significant, extreme hard toil. And I have this, I titled this slide "Safe Assumptions" because this is mostly speculations on my part, but I tend to think that these are probably accurate. Obviously, I don't think Moses looked Egyptian; he looked Hebrew. But he probably was brought up to act, to speak, to dress, and his mannerisms were probably more Egyptian and certainly more royal than his Hebrew counterparts. And yet he identifies with his ethnicity more than he does as a Hebrew or as an Egyptian. He identifies more Hebrew than he does Egyptian because of his ethnicity. And again, that makes me just wonder, did he have this constant, kind of this low-grade feeling of guilt that sometimes erupted in anger, anger at injustice? And I also surmise, and I just speculate here, was he bullied? Was he made fun of because he was Hebrew by the other Egyptian children? We don't know. We don't know how ethnically diverse Pharaoh's household was or was not. We just don't have any indication of that, at least here in the text. But I do wonder if he wasn't bullied or made fun of by the other Egyptian children because of his Hebrew ethnicity. And it would seem to make sense that if that was the case, and we know how mean children can be to each other, right? We just know that if that was the case, that he might have had this low-grade anger and might have had a low-grade feelings of guilt, because in just another verse, he's going to kill an Egyptian. And Matthew chapter 5 is very clear that you cannot kill unless you hate. You cannot kill unless you hate. And so this is something that I'm thinking, and here's my first leadership lesson as a result of all this. Godly leaders identify and understand the daily toils of those whom they lead. We see that Moses goes out and he watches his own people and he watches them at their hard labor. And that watch doesn't just mean he's sitting in a lawn chair sipping iced tea, watching them do what they do. He's actually studying, he's gazing, and he's understanding. And he's identifying. And he's emotionally identifying with them. And he's saying, this is not right. This is not good. I want you to know that godly leaders are able to come along and identify and understand the daily struggles and the daily toils of those whom they lead. Good leadership does that. On the flip side of that is this: leaders who have little compassion for their staff or who are disconnected from their staff will find it hard to gain the trust and confidence of their staff. Even though the staff might be told what to do and that they go ahead and do it, they're not really following. They're just transacting. They're just doing what they were told to do, but they're not really following. And the leader will only be able to take them so far. You ask him to do stuff that's too dangerous or too unsettling, and they'll just say no, because they're not really following. They're just doing what they're told. So godly leaders identify and understand the daily toils of those whom they lead. Now look, we know that Moses goes on and he beats a Hebrew taskmaster, a Hebrew manager, as it were, and he kills him and he buries him in the sand. So right away, we know that Moses knows that what he did was wrong because he tried to hide it. He tried to cover it up. Now the Hebrew word there for beating means to strike or to deliver a sharp blow with a hand or a weapon. And both events where Moses is doing this, both here and then at the well in Midean, he is striking and killing. He is striking. It's the same Hebrew word. And when he kills here, again, it's the same Hebrew word. He then tries to hide his crime because he knows what he did was wrong. Now, Jonathan Sacks, a Hebrew rabbi here, says that Moses acts in 3 times here in this first couple chapters out of a sense of justice. He kills the Egyptian out of a sense of justice. He intervenes in the quarrel. We'll look at that in the next video, out of a sense of justice. It's a quarrel between 2 fellow Israelites. And he also will fight the shepherds at the well to protect the Midianite girls out of a sense of justice. And so Jonathan Sacks sees that Moses has this heightened, elevated sense of justice that is right on the surface there. And again, I wonder if that doesn't come from him having grown up in Pharaoh's household, having been a Hebrew among Egyptians, and having been made fun of or been bullied as a result of that. And he knows that how he was raised in some ways was unjust. And so now he has a greater sense of justice within himself. So here are the Hebrews quarreling. I'm sorry, not next video. It's just in the next slide I meant to say. He asked the Hebrew who is in the wrong. In other words, the Hebrew word there means guilty or wicked. Uh, you know, why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew? And you get the sense in verse 14 that he's really dumbfounded with their fighting. Look, you guys are brothers. You're both Hebrews. Why are you fighting? He doesn't get it. It doesn't make sense to him, right? And so in verse 14, one of them says, well, who made you the ruler or a judge over us? Are you going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian? And right away, Moses realizes that the news has spread quickly among the Hebrews that he had killed their Egyptian taskmaster. And Sarna points out, Sarna is another Hebrew rabbi that I'm reading for the studies. Sarna points out that the missing taskmaster, likely invited an investigation. Look, if you're Egyptian and you're in charge of the taskmasters and you send out 8 taskmasters for the day and only 7 come back, you're gonna go looking for the 8th one, and you're gonna go try to find out what happened to him. And now the Hebrews are being investigated by the Egyptians for possible murder of an Egyptian. Now, if you're Hebrew, you're not going to appreciate this, and you're not going to enjoy the beatings that they give you to try to get the truth out of you, to try to get you to confess. And so they know that they're going to get blamed for this taskmaster, this manager, as it were, being killed. And they really resent Moses for it. And so Moses has placed himself and his own people in serious trouble. And it's little wonder that at this point in time, there's just no way he's accepted by his own people. So while the very people that he identifies with are now rejecting him, he's raised Egyptian, but he's Hebrew. The Egyptians probably have tacit acceptance of him. His own people aren't accepting him now, even though he tried to do the right thing. And he's really becoming a man very quickly without a country and without a people. There's a leadership lesson here that we can learn. It's kind of long, but stay with me here. One of the best ways to lose those whom you are leading is to make their lives more miserable, more complex, more dangerous, more difficult, because in your attempt to do the right thing, you didn't consider the effects of your decisions or actions, and only in retrospect did you see how you actually did the wrong thing. So you're a leader, you're trying to do the right thing, you act out of emotion, and only in retrospect do you see how you did the wrong thing. And in the process, you made the lives of those you're leading that much more difficult. Yeah, that's a good way to burn a bridge with a group of people whom you're trying to lead. And there's a corollary lesson here as well. The best leadership decisions are made with your mind and good information, not with your emotions. When leadership decisions are made with emotions, and there's usually emotions in them, I'll grant that right away, but when emotion drives a decision, then emotions usually get you into trouble. And usually the place as a Christian business owner where you're going to get in the most trouble when you use emotions for decisions is in your human resources. You're going to hire people that you really like, and you're going to hang on to them and protect them simply because you like them. Or you might fire somebody that's top talent because they frustrate you to no end. When you let your emotions drive bad HR decisions, it's going to negatively affect your company, negatively affect the morale, negatively affect the workforce. It's going to negatively affect everything. And so you need to be careful with that. So in verse 14, we know that Moses became afraid. He says to himself, what I did must have become known. And again, did Moses seriously think that no one would find out? I mean, really, did he not connect the dots? I think we see a little naivety here in Moses. He's being naive, I think, and he's immature. And he's just on the beginnings of all that God needs to build into him before he's going to be ready to lead his own people out of Egypt. And so this is probably one of the first leadership lessons that he has, and he's got a lot to learn before he's ready to lead. And so apparently he didn't connect the dots that, he's royalty, that there is a gossip chain out there, and that maybe this naive trust that the Hebrews wouldn't say anything. When, of course, the Egyptians are going to go investigate this, and of course they're going to beat it out of somebody. And that's how Pharaoh finds out. The Hebrew slaves they literally rat out Moses because they're not going to pay for this. They're not going to pay for this with their lives. They're not going to get beat up over this. And when Pharaoh finds out, he wants to kill Moses. And that causes Moses to flee to Midian. And we'll pick up with that part of the story in the next video. So, what's our summary for today? By the way, I forgot. Midian is right here. If you can see where I'm doing my mouse, it's on the west or the east side of the Gulf of Aqaba. And so Egypt is over here, and the land of Goshen, you can see Pithom and Succoth there. And Moses would have had to traverse across the wilderness of Paran and across the tip here and got into Midian. Midian proper sits over here, although in future videos we're going to learn that Midian, boundaries were fuzzy back then, right? They didn't have longitude and latitude like we do today, and so they weren't able to set up boundaries precisely like we can today. But Midian probably existed all the way up certainly into this area of Edom, and probably over into a little bit of this area on the western side of this Arabah. So we estimate that Moses travels about 300 miles, give or take, at 5 to 6 miles a day. Probably would have taken him 2 months to traverse over to Midian. But he had to go that far to get outside of Egyptian control. What we know here is at the time of the Exodus, if you look right here at Ezion Geber, that there's also Eilat is there. There's copper mines right in there. You can go see the Egyptian hieroglyphics on the stones here at the Timnon National, not cemetery, but it's national park for Israel. And there's Egyptian hieroglyphics here. We know that the Egyptians were mining copper here and were sending it back to Egypt. So we know that the Egyptians controlled some of these roads back and forth. And as a result, it probably would have taken Moses a couple, maybe even 3 months to traverse over to Midian and to get outside of control of Egypt, to really get away from Pharaoh, because Pharaoh wants to kill him. And he's going to stay in Midian 40 years. We're going to have a number of videos about what he learns, leadership lessons he learns while he's in Midian. And his call is going to be to lead Israel out of Egypt. So you can take Moses' life, which we think was about 120 years, and you can divide it into 3 parts, 40, 40, 40. The first 40 was being prepped for dealing with Egyptian royalties and protocols, customs, and so forth. The second 40 years was his preparation for being in the wilderness, getting water, finding food, finding fuel, learning how the wilderness works. And the wilderness is quite a thing. Having been there, I can tell you it is really something. And then the last 40 years is him leading Israel right up to the point where they're ready to cross into the promised land, and Joshua is going to take them on into that promised land. Let's not forget that all of this is a part of Ephesians 2:10, for we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works which God has prepared in advance for us to do. So whatever you're doing today, whatever preparation God is pouring in you today, He's doing that to get you ready for a good work tomorrow, and He's in the future preparing that work for you to do. But that doesn't mean that today is irrelevant. It means that today He has good work for you to do, and that work is something that He needs you to do, and He has prepared the work for you and prepared you for the work. we see Ephesians 2:10 being lived out and being fulfilled in the life of Moses. So here's our summary. Godly leaders, just to review, godly leaders identify and understand the daily toils of those whom they lead. And we also learned that one of the best ways to lose those whom you are leading is to make their lives more miserable, more complex, more dangerous, more difficult, because in your attempt to do the right thing, you didn't consider the effects of your decisions and actions. And only in retrospect did you see how you did the wrong thing. And finally, the best leadership decisions are made with your mind and good information, not with your emotions. In other lessons, I'll argue, by the way, that the best leadership decisions are made with your mind, your emotions, and great advisors. Great people that you can bounce ideas off of. But we don't get that out of the text here, and I'm only trying to exegete what is in Exodus right now. So, listen, thank you for joining me today on these leadership lessons from the life of Moses. I hope this is helpful to you. If you'd like to get a hold of me, you can at bill@bibleandbusiness.com. That's my email. I'll invite you to take a look at the introductory video for this channel, where it explains my life and my purpose for doing this. It explains that I work at the Platinum Group and that I am a partner there. All of my consulting, all of my work runs through the Platinum Group. I don't do anything on my own. And they are a great bunch of guys to work with. I'm really, really blessed to be at the Platinum Group out of Minnetonka, Minnesota. And if you ever need help with your business, I'm positive that we can help you. So thank you for listening today, and may God bless you. Have a good day.